How crazy is it that we talk about fights like, we're just a bunch of dudes sitting around talking, then it becomes news stories.
Oh, I know.
The MMA media is so bizarre. Like, we talked shit about that Ken Shamrock Kimbo fight.
Yeah.
That became a giant fucking news story.
You heard Ken Shamrock's feelings. He was like, Joe Rogan shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Do that.
Yeah.
Well,
you're a powerful dude, my man. You know what I've learned on podcasting, too, is... I joke around, I make stuff funny,
exactly.
But then, boom, it's a headline. I'm like, shit, I better watch what I say a little bit.
When you joke around, also, there's a difference between listen to you talk in context of a full conversation where there's a lot of shit talking and laughing,
man, but they
or
take
taking
that.
it and printing it.
Yes.
When it's two-dimensional, it's on paper.
Like Fox did an article where Brian asked me on one of our podcasts, he goes, how do you think Conor's feeling right now? I went, I'm sure he's terrified. The anxiety of fighting. They change your opponent 12 days. It's a completely different style. You're fighting a wrestler. There's some nerves there, man. But he's terrified.
Yeah.
Not that he's not going to win or he doesn't believe in himself. Just naturally, everyone's terrified to fight, man. What's the article say? Brent Schaub thinks Conor's terrified.
Of course.
And then his fans fucking just reach out to me like they want to fucking Travis Brown me. Yeah, just fucking intense.
Yeah.
Like fucking Brittany Palmer. And it's like brutal, man.
Yeah.
So then it's almost like now I don't censor myself, but
you can see how people get careful. You can see how people get very sort of antiseptic and very sort of sanitized.
Well,
right?
what was weird was what articles were being written while the podcast was going on. People were sitting in front of their computer.
Like
with their fingers ready,
Joe Rogan.
And as soon as we were talking about the Cam Shamrock fight, it was in podcast in articles rather.
Did anybody reach out to you about that, Ken, or anybody?
No. Look. I love Ken Shamrock. I'm a huge Ken Shamrock fan, and that's one of the reasons why I was suspicious about him not being able to finish that rear naked choke. Underneath the neck on anybody, with a fresh Ken Shamrock.
Yes.
But I guess you have a good point that he's 51, and look. Kimbo's not a joke, but his ground game's always been the weakest part of his game. Yeah. There's a lot of issues with that fight that a lot of people had, but the big issue was there were fights in Ken's past that were absolutely worked. Jack Slack did a piece on it.
Yeah, the history of it.
Yeah.
So you're not breaking any news.
I'm not breaking any news. Jack Slack was one of the best writers in MMA today. He's fucking fantastic at breaking down fights. He did, I think it was called The Anatomy of a Fixed Fight, and he showed fights from Pancrase that you watch them and you go, oh, okay, that's worked.
Yeah.
Funaki fight.
I don't know.
How cool of an article would it be? Joe Rogan, huge Ken Shamrock supporter. They're not going to write that.
Maybe they would, but
they just sit there and wait for something. Schaub talk shit about Reebok.
It's just that was a position. That position that he had him in is maybe the hardest thing to get out of on the planet. When you got his back underneath like that on top of him.
If you got good jiu-jitsu, no. There's a lot of guys you get their back. Like John Fitch was notorious for you could get his back and choke him, and he figured out a way out of it.
True.
Remember with Eric Silva? Eric Silva had a deep choke on him, and he's like, whatever.
Yeah. High level guys, but let's not get it twisted.
Yeah.
Kimbo Slice isn't winning any jiu-jitsu competition.
Yeah.
So I agree it's a little suspect.
It's a little suspect.
Yeah.
But it's just I think that Ken he's in an unfavorable position. First of all, he's a real legend of MMA. He's one of the guys that started it all off. If it wasn't for Ken Shamrock and his fights, Ken Shamrock was huge back in the day.
Huge.
Before all his career, right? Even in
UFC2,
Japan, right before that.
In Pancrase,
he makes the Mount Rushmore of MMA, for sure.
He's in there 100%. So, and also he created the Lion's Den. Helped guys like Pete Williams came out of there. Yeah, there was a lot of great fighters that came out of there. And that whole Tony Galindo, there was a whole group of guys that came up in that era, that wound up being really big fighters, and a lot of it was under his tutelage. It's just the game's very different now. Fights are very different.
Right.
You're dealing with the John Joneses of the world now. You're dealing with the Yair Rodriguezes. The game has moved. It's a different thing, and Ken is not financially secure. He's not a multi-millionaire like he should be.
Right.
If he was
as a pioneer,
if he was a pioneer in any other sport, if he was a pioneer as a NASCAR driver, if he's a pioneer in basketball or anything like, he would be set for life, living in a mansion, drinking martinis by the pool, on NBC Wild World of Sports, talking about fights that are upcoming, and treated with the respect that he deserves.
Yeah.
But he's in this unfavorable position where he's got to fight at 51 years old. Ugh. And one thing that I like that he said is, I've earned the right to fight for fun. And if that's what he's doing, if that's what he wants to do,
100%.
I'm 100% down with that.
I agree.
Yeah.